"You're not enough, James. You've never been enough." Those words echoed in my head as I stood frozen in the hallway of my own apartment, flowers trembling in my hand. I'd come home early from a business trip to surprise my wife Catherine. Instead, I got the surprise of my lifetime. I'm James Daniel, and this is the story of how I died and came back to life. Through the crack in our bedroom door, I could see her. My Catherine. The woman I'd loved for 3 years, the woman I'd married in a small ceremony because she said she didn't need anything fancy, the woman who told me every morning that I was her whole world. She was in our bed with a man in an expensive suit, her hands running through his hair the way she used to touch me. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up, Nexum Solutions office. Her boss. Richard something. I'd met him once at a company party. He'd shaken my hand with a grip that lingered too long, looked at Catherine like she was property. I didn't burst in screaming. I didn't throw the flowers. I didn't even cry. Something inside me just turned off, like a switch flipping from light to permanent darkness. I backed away slowly, each step careful, quiet. The floor didn't creak. The door didn't slam. I became a ghost in my own home. In my car, I sat for 4 hours in the parking garage. The flowers wilted in the passenger seat. Around 3 a.m., I made a call to the one person who knew all my secrets. "Sarah, it's me. Activate the Phoenix protocol. I'm disappearing tonight." "James, are you sure?" "Just do it. I'll explain later." I hung up and stared at my wedding ring. 3 years of lies wrapped around my finger in white gold. Please, before we continue, like, share and subscribe for more interesting stories. Catherine woke up at 6 a.m. to an empty bed. Nothing unusual. Richard always left before dawn to avoid suspicion. His wife didn't know. Neither did I, apparently, until last night. She shuffled to the kitchen in the silk robe I'd bought her for our anniversary. The one she said made her feel beautiful. I wondered if she wore it for him too. Then she saw the table. Divorce papers neatly stacked. My wedding ring placed on top like a paperweight. And a note in my handwriting, the same handwriting that used to leave love notes in her lunch bag. "You wanted more. I hope you find it. Jay." Her scream could probably be heard 3 floors down. She grabbed her phone, dialed my number. Disconnected. She tried again. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She ran to our bedroom closet, threw it open. Half my clothes were gone, but only the cheap ones from Target and Old Navy. The expensive watch her parents gave me for our wedding? Still there. My college hoodies? Gone. She called my office, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. "Hi, I'm looking for James Daniel." "I'm sorry, ma'am. James resigned 2 days ago via email." Didn't give a reason. Catherine collapsed on the kitchen floor, the note crumpling in her fist. That's when her phone buzzed. A text from Richard, "Can't meet tonight. Wife suspicious. Let's cool off for a while." She stared at those words. Then at the divorce papers. Then at the ring that had promised forever. What had she done? She tried to find me. Called my friends, they hadn't heard from me. Checked social media, I deleted everything. Hired a private investigator who came back 3 weeks later with nothing. James Daniel had vanished like smoke. 8 months crawled by like years. Catherine's world collapsed in slow motion. Richard dumped her 2 weeks after I disappeared, claiming he needed to focus on saving his marriage. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying her life. Nexum Solutions started hemorrhaging money, clients leaving, projects failing, whispers of bankruptcy in every hallway. She got demoted twice. Her salary was cut by 40%. The corner office became a cubicle. The executive parking spot became street parking 6 blocks away. She moved from our 2-bedroom apartment to a studio that smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams. Sold her car. Started taking the bus. Picked up freelance work on weekends just to pay rent. Every night, she stared at old photos of us on her phone. Me bringing her coffee in bed. Us laughing at some stupid movie. The life she'd incinerated for 15 minutes of validation from a man who never cared about her. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Catherine sat exhausted in the main conference room, dark circles under her eyes, her blazer hiding the fact that she'd lost 15 pounds from stress. Richard stood at the head of the table, looking like he'd aged a decade. His hands shook slightly as he held his notes. "I have good news," he said, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "We've been acquired by a private equity firm. They're sending new leadership next week to restructure the company." Catherine felt the smallest flicker of hope. Maybe she'd keep her job. Maybe things would stabilize. The new CEO wants to meet every department head individually. Richard checked his notes, squinting. The firm keeps his identity confidential until the first day. Some kind of privacy policy. A chill ran down Catherine's spine. She didn't know why, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. The lobby of Nexum Solutions had never felt so small. Catherine stood with 15 other managers, all dressed in their best attempts at looking employable. The elevator dinged. Everyone straightened their postures, plastered on fake smiles. The doors opened. A man stepped out in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Catherine's entire year of rent. Tall, taller than she remembered. Leaner, with shoulders that suggested expensive gym memberships and personal trainers. His jaw was sharper, covered in perfectly trimmed stubble. Hair styled by someone who charged $200 an hour. But those eyes. She knew those eyes. Her folder slipped from her hands and exploded across the marble floor, papers scattering like her sanity. "Good morning, everyone." His voice was different, colder, harder, wrapped in steel. "I'm James Daniel, your new CEO. I'm here to save this company and clean out anyone who's been holding it back." His eyes swept across the room like a searchlight. They landed on Catherine for exactly 2 seconds. No recognition flickered there. No emotion. No pain. Nothing. He walked past her like she was furniture. Sarah Chin, the stunning Asian woman at his side with an iPad and designer heels, gave Catherine a look she couldn't quite read. Pity? Warning? Amusement? Richard stood beside Catherine, frozen. "You know him?" he whispered. Catherine couldn't answer. Her throat had closed. Her heart had stopped. Her brain was screaming that this wasn't possible, that James was gone, that he'd disappeared, that he was supposed to be broken somewhere, not standing here looking like he owned the world. Because he did own it now. He owned Nexum Solutions. He owned Richard. And worst of all, he owned her future. 3 days of silence. James passed Catherine in hallways without acknowledging her existence. He held meetings where she presented reports and he looked through her like she was glass. At night, she went home and vomited from anxiety. Then her phone buzzed during lunch. "Catherine Daniel, my office. 2 p.m. JD. She hadn't eaten in 2 days anyway. At 1:55 p.m. she stood outside his office on the executive floor, a place she'd been banned from after her second demotion. Sarah sat at the assistant's desk, typing with perfect manicured nails. She glanced up. "Go in. He's expecting you." Catherine opened the door. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Minimalist furniture that screamed wealth. A glass desk with a laptop and a single folder. James sat behind it, reviewing documents, his face unreadable. He didn't look up. "Sit." She sat. 30 seconds of silence. Catherine counted them. Each one was a knife. "Your performance reviews show a 23% decline in productivity over the last 8 months. His voice was clinical, detached. "Client complaints have tripled. You were demoted twice. Your direct supervisor noted that you seemed distracted and unreliable." He finally looked up. Those eyes, they used to look at her with so much love. Now they were boardroom weapons. "Tell me why I should keep you." Catherine's throat was sandpaper. "James, Mr. Daniel." His interruption was a whip crack. "In this office you will address me as Mr. Daniel. Now answer the question." She forced words past the lump in her throat. "I've been going through a difficult time, but I'm committed to improving. I know this company inside and out. I can be valuable if given the chance." "Difficult time?" His eyebrow raised a fraction. "Elaborate." She couldn't. Not without confessing everything. "Personal issues, Mr. Daniel." He leaned back, studying her like a specimen. "I see. You're dismissed. Expect another meeting soon." Week 2 brought the hammer down. Catherine watched from her cubicle as security escorted Richard to James's office. The door closed. 30 minutes passed. She couldn't focus on her work, just stared at that closed door like it held her fate. When Richard emerged, his face was the color of old newspaper. He walked straight to his office and started throwing things into a box with shaking hands. Catherine rushed over. "What happened?" Richard wouldn't look at her. His hands fumbled with a picture frame. "He knows everything. The affair. The cookbooks. All of it." Ice water filled Catherine's veins. "How?" "Because he had us investigated 3 years ago." Richard finally met her eyes and she saw terror there. He had proof before he even left. Photos. Financial documents. Everything. "He's been planning this acquisition for months, maybe longer." He shoved a folder at her. Catherine opened it with trembling fingers. Photos of her and Richard at restaurants. Entering hotels. In Richard's car. Time-stamped and dated, All from 3 years ago, right before James disappeared. Financial spreadsheets showing Richard's embezzlement. Falsified reports. Everything that could send him to prison. He's not here to save the company, Catherine. Richard's voice cracked. He's here to destroy us. And I think you're next. Catherine stood there holding evidence of her own betrayal, professionally documented and organized. James hadn't just left. He'd gathered ammunition. He'd planned. He'd waited. And now he was back to pull the trigger. That night, she went home to her studio apartment and pulled out the shoebox she kept hidden in her closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them written to James over the past 8 months. Letters apologizing, begging, confessing. Letters she never sent because she had no address to send them to. She wrote another one that night, knowing he'd never read it. Knowing it was already too late. Week 3. Catherine waited outside James's office until 8 p.m. when the floor emptied. She'd rehearsed this 100 times. Her hands were steady. Her voice would be calm. She would apologize like an adult. She knocked. Come in. She entered. James sat behind his desk, still working, still perfect, still unreachable. I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. The words tumbled out faster than planned. I'm sorry. I ruined everything. I was broken and stupid and terrified and... Stop. That one word silenced her like a slap. James pulled a folder from his drawer and slid it across the glass desk. Do you know what this is? Catherine opened it. Financial documents. Asset reports. Net worth statements. Her eyes caught a number and stopped breathing. Net worth. $1,249,000,000. $1.2 billion. While you were sleeping with your boss in our bed, James said, his voice barely controlled, each word precise as a scalpel, I was already wealthy beyond your comprehension. I sold a tech company I built in college for $847 million before we even met. Catherine's tears fell on the paper, smudging the ink. I chose to live modestly because I wanted someone to love me for who I was, not what I had. I worked that ordinary job. I rented that ordinary apartment. I drove that ordinary car. Because I wanted to know that someone could love James the person, not James the billionaire. He stood, walked to the window, hands in his pockets. You failed that test in the worst way possible. I didn't know, Catherine's voice broke. That's exactly the point. James turned, and for just a second she saw pain flash across his face. You never asked who I really was. You just wanted what you thought was better. And it turns out, better was a broke middle manager with a failing company and a wife at home. Month 2 brought the impossible. You're being promoted. Catherine stared at James across his desk, certain she'd misheard. VP of Client Relations. Your salary will be $270,000 annually, triple your current pay. You'll report directly to me. You start Monday. I don't understand. Catherine's brain couldn't process this. Why? James stood, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he now commanded. Because despite everything, you're exceptional at your job when you're focused. Your client retention rates were 94% before your personal life imploded. You understand this industry. You're strategic. I need that. He turned to face her. But there are conditions. You'll work 60-hour weeks minimum. You'll travel internationally, Tokyo, London, Singapore. You'll sit in on every executive meeting. You'll watch me rebuild everything you helped destroy. You'll see me succeed, see this company thrive, see me build an empire. And you'll do it from close enough to remember exactly what you lost. Catherine understood then. This wasn't mercy. This was a cage made of proximity. He was keeping her close not to forgive her, but to torture her with what could have been. Every meeting would be a reminder. Every business trip would be a ghost of the honeymoon they never took because she said they couldn't afford it, not knowing he could have bought the entire resort. You'll sign a 5-year contract. Non-compete clause. If you leave, you can't work in this industry for 3 years. You'll also sign an NDA regarding anything you learn about my business operations or personal life. He slid the contract across the desk. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely this time. Catherine looked at the contract, then at the man she'd destroyed. She had no choice. She needed this job. Needed the money. Needed the career path. But mostly she needed to be near him even if it killed her. I accept, Mr. Daniel. Month 4 brought the company gala. Nexum Solutions was celebrating a 40% profit increase under new leadership. The ballroom glittered with champagne and success. Catherine wore a simple black dress from a discount store, the nicest thing she could afford. Then James arrived. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than her car used to be worth. And on his arm, a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Tall, elegant, wearing a crimson dress that probably had a designer name Catherine couldn't pronounce. Her diamond earrings caught the light like falling stars. Sarah leaned over and whispered to Catherine, "That's Melissa Zhao, tech CEO from Singapore. She runs a neural interface company worth $300 million. They've been seeing each other for 6 months." Catherine's champagne glass nearly slipped from her hand. She watched James laugh at something Melissa said. Actually laugh, that real laugh she hadn't heard in years. The woman touched his arm casually, comfortably, like she had the right to. James leaned in and whispered something that made her smile. They looked perfect together. Like they belonged in this world of wealth and success and designer tuxedos. Catherine excused herself to the bathroom and vomited. When she returned, dabbing her mouth with paper towels, Sarah was waiting outside the restroom. "You okay?" "Fine." The lie tasted like bile. Sarah studied her with eyes that saw too much. "He's moved on, you know. He's been dating for 2 years. This one might actually be serious. I've never seen him bring someone to a company event before." Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. A fissure running through the last bit of hope she'd been stupidly, desperately holding on to. "Good for him," she whispered. That night, she went home and cried until dawn, finally understanding that moving on wasn't something James might do. He already had. Month 6. Friday night. Catherine sat in her apartment with half a bottle of wine and a year of regret. She made a decision that was either brave or stupid, probably both. At 9 p.m. she walked back to the office. James's light was still on. Of course it was. He worked like a man trying to outrun his past. She didn't knock, just opened the door. He looked up, surprised for the first time since returning. "We're closed. Schedule a meeting if. We need to talk." The wine made her bold. "As colleagues? Schedule a meeting on Monday." As two people who used to love each other. James's jaw tightened. "That person is dead. Then let me talk to his ghost." Catherine sat down uninvited, and something in her expression made James not call security. "I hate myself every single day for what I did. Not because you're rich, I didn't know that. Not because I lost the promotion or the salary. Because I lost you." Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. "Richard made me feel important for 5 minutes. He paid attention when I felt invisible. He promised me things that sounded like security. But it was all lies. The only real thing I ever had was you, and I destroyed it because I was too damaged and stupid to recognize love when it was right in front of me." Tears streamed down her face now. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. I just need you to know that losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Worse than foster care. Worse than being abandoned. Worse than everything. Because those things happened to me. But losing you? That was my choice. My fault. My destruction." James stared at her for a long moment. Then he said something that shattered her completely. "I know. That's why I came back." Month 8. James called Catherine to his office with Sarah present as a witness. "Nexum Solutions is now profitable and stable. I'm selling it to a German conglomerate for $89 million. The deal closes in 3 weeks." Catherine's heart sank. She'd lose her job. Start over again. The cycle would continue. However, James slid a contract across the desk. "I'm starting a new company. Smaller, focused on AI security consulting. I need a VP of operations. This is your offer." Catherine stared at the document. 5-year contract. Equity included. Salary, $280,000. "I don't understand." Her voice was barely a whisper. James leaned back in his chair. "Because despite everything, you're brilliant at what you do. Your client presentations are exceptional. Your strategic thinking is sharp. You turn projects around. And I'm tired of punishing you." He stood, walked to the window, the same position he always took when saying difficult things. "I'm not asking you to come back as my wife. That door is closed and locked and the key is buried. But I'm asking you to prove that you're more than your worst mistake. That you can rebuild yourself the way I rebuilt myself." Catherine looked at Sarah, who gave the slightest nod. This was real. "This is a professional offer," James continued. "You'll work harder than you've ever worked. You'll earn every dollar. You'll prove every single day that you deserve to be there. And maybe, eventually, we can build something that looks like mutual respect. Maybe even friendship. But that's years away. Right now, I'm offering you a chance." He turned to face her. "You have 48 hours to decide. I suggest you choose more carefully this time." Catherine stared at the contract, at a future she didn't deserve but desperately wanted. "Can I ask you something? One question." Why are you really doing this? James smiled sadly. Because someone once told me that people deserve to be judged by their growth, not just their failures. 3 weeks later, Catherine sat in the new office of Phoenix Security Consulting. Modern, sleek, full of potential. Smaller than Nexum, but somehow it felt bigger. More real. James walked in at 8 a.m. with 2 coffees. He handed her one without a word. Thanks, she said, surprised. They worked in comfortable silence for an hour. Catherine reviewed client contracts. James coded something on his laptop, occasionally muttering at the screen. It felt almost normal. Almost like the early days before everything shattered. Then Catherine spoke. Why did you really give me this chance? James didn't look up from his screen. Because someone once told me that people deserve to be judged by their growth, not just their failures. Who told you that? He finally met her eyes. You did. 7 years ago, when I told you about cheating on an exam in college and feeling like I'd never forgive myself. You held my hand and said people aren't defined by their worst moments. Silence filled the space between them. I loved you, Catherine. Part of me always will. But that man who left you the note? He's gone. I'm different now. Stronger. I don't need you the way I used to. I don't need anyone that way anymore. Catherine nodded, tears in her eyes but her voice steady. I know. But maybe I can earn a new version of your trust. As a colleague. As a friend. And someday if I prove myself. She didn't finish. James allowed the smallest smile. Someday is a long time away. Get back to work, VP Daniel. She smiled through her tears and opened her laptop. Outside the window, the city glowed with morning light. 2 broken people rebuilt into something harder. Something that could survive. Not together. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But side by side, building something new from the ashes of who they used to be. James's phone buzzed. A message from his attorney lit up the screen. Catherine's ex-boss Richard filed lawsuit against you for $12 million. Claims wrongful termination and corporate espionage. Discovery starts next month. This could destroy everything. James's smile faded. The revenge wasn't over. It was just beginning.